G'day Insta and g'day Facebook. Streaming on both tonight. So sorry for being a little bit late. I'm just going to welcome people coming on. It is being streamed live again on Insta, guys. As I said, so occasionally I'll be looking at a camera there. I've got two cameras. I've got an iPhone X, which is the one I'm using on Facebook, and I've got an iPhone 7, which I'm using on Insta. So guys and girls, good evening. Hi Aaron, how you going? Hi Mick, Mike from New Zealand. Always great to see you. Andrew Campbell, how you going? Andy Overman from the UK. Chrissy, how you going? Welcome to all. I want to say hi to everyone, and hello Paul Biller. Congratulations on your, mate. I think you did about 300,000 to 400,000 in GCI in the last month or so. Well done, mate. Marcel, how you going? Guys and girls, tag someone. Hey Guy Lorello, Rain and Horn Burwood, how you going? So gang, tag someone or press that share button. You know how much it means to me. The currency I work on is attention, and it's a message that I love to preach to you, that everyone is fighting for everyone's attention in this new connection economy. You got Facebook, you've got Insta, you've got Foxtel, you've got, things in your letterbox dropped, you've got emails. And in a world that is fighting for attention, content is king. And hey Willie, how you going? I'm hoping that tonight I can deliver you a very good, authentic 15 or 20 minutes. The title of this rant is Diary of a Wimpy Wog Boy. And I think it's pretty much a very accurate description of my early years. My early years, guys and girls, let me tell you, they were highly characterized by parents who had come over from Greece. And the thing that was pretty big in my life, guys and girls, was as a young person that kept the Greek community together and kept me close to my parents, was soccer, which was a club called Panhellenic, and then it changed its name to Sydney Olympic, and the church. So these were the two institutions that would actually have people on a Sunday come together after working Monday to Friday. And this was what it was like for the Greek community that traditionally come over from the 50s and 60s to Australia. And what they would do is they would, work Monday to Friday, and then they would come back, and that their, whole social life was based around those two things. That's where you'd come together. For me, it was a really, I look back, it was like living in two worlds, because at home you lived like you were in Greece, but you'd go to school and you'd live like you were an Aussie boy. Some of the things, like there were some bizarre things that happened in those days. I think back at, my family once held a picnic on a golf course. They just saw that this beautiful golf course, the lawn was beautiful, and they specifically chose the putting green because it was the best place to actually sit. And all I can tell you is that there were people screaming at us, so we had to leave. Subsequently, in the months that followed, I found out that golf courses, though that they look beautiful and that, were not for people to have picnics. One of the things that I was brought up, and anyone that's watching this that is of Greek origin will know that the Greek community has got this thing about what will people think. What will people think? They're really obsessed about the judgment of other people, and how important it is that you carry yourself with a certain level of credibility and respect, and you shouldn't do anything that people will frown upon. This dictated a lot of my life in the early years, but as time has gone by, it has been something that plays very little significance to me. And many of you know that, deal with me through my real estate work and my real estate gym. I don't care one little bit, whether I'm getting praise or whether I'm being slagged off by people. When you know who you are, you don't really give a fuck about what other people think of you. And this became a really important part of my self-development, knowing who you are, And it's one of the things that I preach to a lot of young people now, is that the minute you know who you are, you don't really care that much what the views of the people around you are. And the reason why is what you learn is that when other people make a judgment, it's not about you, it is very much about them. Like if you've got an ambitious goal and they don't see that goal, you got to remember that what they're saying is that they see that they can't achieve that goal. By the way, I now drink alkaline water, and thanks to Nick Riggers, who continues to encouraging me to have hydration during these Sunday night rants. So those were the early years, you know. I have to say, and I'm going to be upfront and authentic and say things that even, you know, I'm conscious that, you know, my daughters will and may watch parts of this rant, if it's not now, at a later time. But in my high school years, so I went to a high school in Kingsgrove North, and at a pretty early age at school, and I would say in, you know, probably within the first 2 to 3 years of high school, I took up smoking. I remember the first cigarette I had was Peter Stuyvesant. That's what my father smoked, Peter Stuyvesant cigarettes. And I remember taking one of his cigarettes and smoking it when my mum and dad had gone shopping. I do remember how difficult it was to actually inhale that cigarette. Subsequently, I know how difficult it is for people to stop cigarettes. And I think it's a hard habit to take on, and it is a super hard. As Aaron Robinson says, soft pack. That is 100% correct, Aaron. It was Peterson Stuyvesant soft pack. That's what it was. You read my fucking, I'm not swearing. So guys and girls, and I remember being caught smoking in the toilets at home and telling my parents that what I did is, in fact, I was burning toilet paper. That's right. I told my mother that I was burning toilet paper in the bathroom when she smelled smoke. So drugs was an interesting thing. Because at the school I went there, you know, and I seem to have, you know, hung around with lots of different groups of people. I had the Greek boys and the Italian boys, but I also had my Aussie friends, you know. So I was never really tied up with one specific group. I had smart friends and I had dumb friends. I had the good people and I had the bad people. I seem to be across, and I think it's something that I've learnt in life, that keep everyone close by. And I think it's actually a very influential, powerful thing to do in the world of business, because when you take sides, you actually do lose your power. And when you're actually staying sort of in the center, everyone is chasing you. And that is, by the way, a fantastic rule in a great book that I'm reading at the moment called Mastery and Power by Robert Greene. He talks about the way that one keeps their power is to actually not take sides with people. Drugs was a very interesting thing for me, and for you know, marijuana was probably the thing that was, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s. That was the drug that I was exposed to. They had different names for it, you know, grass, dope, pot, you name it. It was, I mean, I still remember the process. You used to go buy from 7-Eleven shops Mr. Juicy orange juice, and you would actually produce a bong out of a Mr. Juicy bottle, and subsequently you would go back to the 7-Eleven after you were stoned because you had the munchies. It feels weird actually saying this stuff, but look, you know, it is what it is, and I think to myself that everything that's happened has made me who I am today. So in terms of other drugs that I went through in my life, you know, there was a term that was called snow cones, and that was where they used to put speed on top of the marijuana, and it would actually give you both a speed high and a dope high. Probably when I finished high school, and then in those, you know, first 2 or 3 or 4 years after high school, when I started going out and got into a group of people that at the time dance music was in its very early stages. There was bands like, you know, Black Box, Inner City, and it was just in the early stages of, you know, house music. And I remember spending a fair few nights at the Hordern Pavilion, where basically the way the Hordern Pavilion worked, and, you know, as Nick Pappas says, DCMs, a lot of those clubs along Oxford Street, the way it worked is, and you'd go out on Saturday night and then you'd go to day club at Black Market. So in many ways you actually lost your Sunday and you went back to work. Probably the drug that was used mostly then was ecstasy, and that was in the cauldron, as Lisa Novick says. Yes, the cauldron, Black Market, the cauldron, Rogues. Darling Harbour was a place I'd frequent, which was Bobby McGee's, the Craig, Bayswater, Sugar Reef. It doesn't really matter what their names were. But all I can say to you is that I was exposed to drugs, but the one thing I never, ever did, but there was people in the areas, because you got to remember, I was brought up in, you know, the Canterbury Bankstown area, and that was, you know, Belmore, Lakemba, and heroin was rife. And I have to tell you, you know, people I went to school with, people that I was quite close to, did go down that path of heroin, and many have not recovered. So in terms of, I mean, life to me changed significantly with one event, and that was the death of a friend of mine called Joel Goddard. And Joel Goddard died in a motorcycle accident about an hour before we were supposed to play indoor soccer at Chalora. That pretty much changed a lot of things, because the death, obviously a death, you know, of someone in their teens, that happened at around 18, 19, changed, like, you know, my parents got strict, you know, after the funeral, pretty much I didn't go out much at all. Yeah, so that event, you know, with Joel Goddard, who was taken out of this planet at an early age. He was driving on George's River Road on a motorcycle, and we had indoor soccer, and he never showed up. And he tried to overtake on the left lane. A car got in the way, and he actually avoided that and hit a tree at lightning speed and died instantly. In terms of, you know, girls and that side of things, like, I was like any guy, you know, like, you know, in the early stages, it was like a moral victory was getting a phone number off a girl, and you used to go out, and I have to say, like most guys at that age, their identity is highly dependent. Hey, as Greta Simpson says, Kinsella's as well, the exchange. Yeah, it was at a time where I think a lot of the dance scene, which, you know, like a lot of elements of it still exist today. But anyway, let me keep my focus on here, and I'm trying to keep a structure. I'm trying to give you a path of how it all happened. In many ways, I think it's sort of self-therapy for myself doing this rant, because it's giving me an idea of various things that have happened along the way. Look, you know, like most guys, my identity in those early years, like, you know, was on how successful you were with picking up girls, getting phone numbers, And I have to tell you that back then, aesthetically, looks was a big factor in how attractive a girl was to me. I would say the ratio would probably be, 90%, like if she was tall and, had a good body. And then 10% personality. I have to say to you, like, to me, life is so different now. Life is so different. Like, I can tell you, the personality of someone totally affects the way that they look, and I've told you, before that I've had situations where someone in the first 10 seconds that might be attractive, but once you get talking to them, you just notice that their looks in your eyes just change dramatically. So the attitude and your personality can dramatically affect your attractiveness, which is something that you need to understand about the importance of your attitude. And a smile is the best cosmetic surgery anyone can have. My first job was at Luna Park, and that was an interesting job because at Luna Park I worked as the wizard, and my job as the wizard was to actually I was looking after the Dodgem cars, and they had me looking after the roller coaster and all sorts of rides. And then one day the wizard just quit. And what the wizard did, he wore a hat and he wore a wizard's outfit, and people would come up, and what you'd have to do is to guess their weight within 1 stone, their age within 5 years, and their month of birth within 3 months. And if you lost, they would win a prize. If I won, they got nothing. The prizes weren't very, very much anyway. They were small prizes. But I have to say to you that job at Luna Park was an interesting job. It taught me the importance of being able to make people laugh because people loved, the humor in it all. It also taught me that if you wanted to flatter a female, you always were conservative with their age and also their weight for that matter. So that was the job at Luna Park. Sales was, like, to me, real estate sales was like the thing that just opened up my eyes completely. It gave me the ticket to freedom, because having brought up with a family that did not have, like, we weren't really, really poor, but we didn't have much money. My parents weren't the type that, like you hear about a lot of Greek families that open up businesses and all that sort of stuff. It was struggle street. My dad worked at a factory. He used to get up at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, and he made fuck all in money. And I have to tell you that to me has been probably one of the biggest drivers of motivation. The fact that I've been able to make a living out of basically talking to people, whether it's in big groups, small groups, but being able to have a good story when I talk to people, being able to, have a job where you've got uncapped earnings, where you have freedom, where you don't have to invest a lot of money. This, like, sales to me was just like this fucking incredible opportunity that opened up my eyes, that basically said, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter what your education was. The sky was the limit. And I have to tell you, I just became super obsessed to go pro. And I remember my early stages. What I did is I studied a book, How to Master the Art of Selling by Tom Hopkins. And in many ways, my self-development began in those early to mid 20 years of age, where I became committed to self-development. During the week, good day Stevie Georgiakis, one of the best left foot players in Australian football, and lives very local to me. I was having some fresh orange juice from his great mum today in Haberfield. But sales to me was this incredible opportunity where it basically said you've got uncapped earnings. But here, as I gave you a post this week, what helped me most about succeeding in sales was, it wasn't the money. And I got to tell you, the money was great. What it was the person you had to become to make the money. And that's where the journey of Tom Panos version 2.0 came in. This is where I learned I had to become disciplined, where I had to learn rituals, where I had to learn scripts and dialogues, because people would say the same thing to you. And you had to learn to never use 1,000 words when 50 will do. So I decided to become a pro at it, where you had to have targets, where you had to make sure that you had a diary with a clear to-do list, where you had to be on top of your game all the time, because people didn't care about your problems when you went out to pitch for business. So for me, sales was good, because what it did is it created me to have to become another person. And then over the next decade, I have to tell you, I made great money. I picked up money in lots of industries, but it always had to do with budgets and actuals. That was my whole life. My whole life, wherever it was, it's budgets and actuals. It was chasing revenue. And it all went well. And then it was in 2006, in March, when I got diagnosed the first time with illness. And I still remember the first day walking into a chemo ward, because I got actually dressed up, I picked up, nicer clothes than normal to go into chemo. And I clearly remember as I walked into Gloucester House, which where I got treated at RPA the first time. Now it's Lifehouse. It's been renovated, and it's across the road. But I clearly remember walking in, and the first thought I had as I looked around in the chemo ward was, Tom, this is not the place to be vain. That was the first time that I realized that everyone is connected. You could be a surfy from Cronulla, you could be a Muslim from Auburn, or you could be a high-flying executive from Rose Bay. If you're sitting in that room, you are together, you are one, you are part of each other. And that is, you have a common goal, and that is the eradication of the cancer cells in your body, so you can have a longer period of this planet. For me, as I've said to you many times, that my journey now a number of times with illness has taught me that some of the best gifts come badly wrapped. It's also taught me that do not take for granted that you've got endless days. I mean, I have to tell you, time is a non-renewable resource. It is, in fact, the highest commodity. Money comes and goes. It goes in from one account to another. It's, in this new world of cashless and Apple Pay, money itself has little bearing. But what I can tell you is that this time that we've got this evening, on this Sunday night in December, may I say to you, if you think about it clearly in your head, this is the most amount of time you've got left in your life. Think about that. This is the most amount of time you've got left in your life. So I have to say to you, it doesn't matter what's going to happen and what kind of a profile you are. If you're a safe profile person, or if you take bold risks, the survival rate's exactly the same. It's 100% terminal. Everyone goes. So, gang, I can tell you that was a major change in my life, and for me, it's taught me about my purpose and my motivation, because up until that time, I have to tell you, my motivation was about personal, what I can take away and I can accumulate. Now I clearly know I'm going to go to my grave when the time comes, when God has chosen for me to move to the next chapter, which is, of course, the longer chapter that you're going to have. It's eternal. And this is, of course, in an audition. So I'm going to tell you, don't get too caught up with it all, because the reality is that life goes with a blink of an eye before you know it. And whilst the days may take long to end, let me tell you, at the end, your life will feel like it's gone in an instant. So my life now, I look at more about not what I can take for myself, because I clearly know that I will end up leaving this planet with more resources that I actually need. And in many ways, it's about, inheritance now. And what I can tell you is that it's not until you have a cause bigger than yourself that you will make purpose and meaningful and direction, and you'll need no alarm clock in your life. And that's where I am. It's, I just want you to think about it. And by the way, Stephen, the reason I'm not... Stephen Brown gave me a Tottenham jumper when I was in the UK 14 days ago. And the reason I did not wear my Tottenham jumper is that a 1-1 draw with Watford is not sufficient enough for me to put the Tottenham jersey on. We will wait for a win. Guys, until you find a purpose that's bigger than yourself, you will always find that you will live in the grind, and you will always be sort of thinking to yourself, what can I get out of here? You'll always think to yourself, scarcity, that for you to win, someone else must lose. Gang, I'm going to thank you again for your attention. I'd love you to press that share button, because as you know, as I've said to you in my final sentence before, my purpose is making an impact. And I clearly know now that someone watching this may turn around and say, I'm happy I heard this when I'm only 20 or 25. I wish I had actually taught myself these things. And my final message to you is, let me just tell you, everything's gonna be just fine. God bless you and good night.